Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, then I especially thank you for giving me your time so early. Growing up, I remember the days of chain letters. What's a chain letter? Well, if you're on the younger side, you might not know. But they were letters that were sent out and encouraged people to share them to somebody else. They would be things like, they were especially popular when email got when email became ubiquitous, they especially got popular. They would be something like, please send this to 10 people, and if you do, then you might win $1 million, something like that. And so people would send them, and then you started getting all the news stories and lots of misinformation. Well, today the spirit of chain letters lives on in social media. All right. So we're going to talk about several things this morning. I think what I'm going to start doing is on Wednesdays. I think that just seems like a good day for whatever reason. I don't know. I just chose Wednesday kind of randomly. It felt good to be a random dad musings where I just talk about multiple things, right? They may or may not be connected. It's not necessarily a one topic show. It'll just be multiple things. And who knows how long I'll talk about them, right? So today I want to start with, well, let me tell you what happened. So yesterday I saw something on social media and I was like, aha. And so I copied the link and I sent it to a couple friends. And one of my friends pushed back on it. And he was like, well, I don't really know that this is saying what you think it's saying. I don't know that it's really giving that. And so he was pushing back, and then I was, kind of defending, like, no, this is totally right. And so then after a few back and forths, I decided to go ahead and look up the original clip. So this was like a clip on social media, and I went to look up the original video that this clip came from. And at first I was having trouble finding it. There was a moment there where I was like, well, maybe this is just a made up clip. Like maybe this is some really good AI, which didn't really seem likely. So I kept looking, and finally I found the original clip. So let me show you the tweet that kind of started it all for me. So here's this tweet. It's from somebody, it's from a larger account, Dr. Simon Godek. I'm not really sure who that is exactly. And he's quoting Bill Gates in this clip. Bill Gates is saying, I can't remember talking about masks at all. And then he in the rest of this tweet or post goes on to say this video not only proves Bill Gates is lying, but also that he has solely spread falsehoods about masks. Bonus video below, right? So let me play this clip here because the clip of this video is what got me, and then I sent it to my buddy, and then he pushed back on it. And then we're going to talk about, and I'm going to show you some clips from the original video, and we're going to talk about misinformation here a little bit. So let's see here. Let's get you right there. All right. So here's the clip. Now, this is the same clip that was in the tweet, the post that I had sent my friend. Okay. So this is the exact clip as I heard it. And we actually got quite a few clips today, but that's okay. All right. So here it is.
I don't remember talking about masks at all, but the two of you, you personally were using masks. Yeah. I remember you seemed like a really extreme case because you would wear the full thing when you leave your apartment. And it was like, is he gone overboard? Is he germphobic?
I was doing,
hope we've learned in the last year?
Yeah, I just don't think of wearing a mask as such a deep inconvenience. I mean, we ask people to wear pants, why was this politicized early stage of the infection? We thought this was about coughing. We didn't know the simple masks would provide so much benefit. You get the message about masks to be a kind of bipartisan, let's protect other people type message. And then
Okay, so that was the clip. And as you can see, the very beginning clip is just a few seconds. It's like 20 seconds maybe. And it's showing Bill Gates saying, I don't remember talking about mask at all. And then it goes into showing clips of him talking about mask on different platforms, at different events and, in interviews and whatnot. And so my initial takeaway was like, okay, homeboy lying. Like, he said he's not talking about masks, but he clearly did. Like, everybody was talking about masks. So I was having this exchange with my buddy, and my buddy was like, well, his overall argument was there might be some missing context here. There may be something prior to that clip of him saying, I don't remember talking about mask, that might make it, that might add some clarity to the point where it's not an issue of him saying he never remembers talking about mask during COVID times, but maybe he's talking about a particular event or a particular situation. And so I had to give my buddy a little bit of credit because like he was making a good point, and I did push back. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I just, laid down. I did the Liberty Dad thing. I pushed back, the big blowhard podcaster guy. I pushed back. But then I had to come to the reality. And so what I found was that this video clip of him saying that comes from something called the Working Dinner. So he created a series of podcast videos where him and several other people are having dinner together and they're talking. Now, the interesting thing is the video that this comes from is about 15 minutes long. So it's not a very long video. Now, we're not going to play the whole video. I'm just going to play a couple clips from it just to give you an idea of what he was talking about. So we played the clip that I saw on Twitter, formerly or X, formerly known as Twitter. Now let's play a portion a little bit before that particular clip of him saying, I don't recall talking about mask. So here is some additional context, and then we're gonna see a little bit more. So let's pull this up. There we are. And
I know that you're working on a pandemic book, and in that book, you talk about that dinner as a sort of a turning point for you. I also remember it as a pivotal point for us. And so I was just curious, why did you think about having a dinner? What were you trying to get out of that conversation?
Well, the nice thing about a dinner is that the conversation can go in any direction, and nobody feels like they had to come with slides or something. Yeah. I think it was pretty short notice. Like on a Monday, I was like, look, either I should stop worrying about this thing or we should all worry a heck of a
A
lot
lot
more.
Yeah.
And I'd like to know, which is it?
Okay, so that's the end of this little section. So you can hear the woman in the video, and I don't remember her name at the moment. The woman in the video is asking him, she's recalling, this dinner that they had back in 2020. So what happened was in 2020, around February, Bill Gates called up some of his friends and said, let's have a dinner, a working dinner. And let's talk about what's going on. Okay. And so now in this video, what he's doing, or what they're all doing, is reminiscing about that prior dinner, and they're kind of taking a reflective of what what were our thoughts back then, where were we, and where are we now, right? So it's very much like this retroactive, like, okay, how do we do kind of a thing, but instead they're doing it more casual, as you can see, because he said, look, nobody needs to bring PowerPoints, let's just sit down, have a working dinner, and we're going to talk about what we think. Some of it'll be factual, some of it will be emotional. Okay, so that's the first part. So that's laying the stage for what they're doing in this video, which is to talk about a prior dinner that they had, and then also to talk about some of their feelings early on, right? And then there's multiple videos where they're having this working dinner and they talk about different things. Now, I didn't watch all of the videos, I just watched this particular one. So now I want to go to the part where this is the part where the original clip that I saw on social media came from. Now, the way this video is constructed, because I did watch the first one, I watched the whole thing, all 15 minutes of it. Okay, I didn't watch the ones after, but I watched this one. And the way it works is they're videotaping them having dinner. But then at certain points, they cut away and it's like a little mini interview with each individual person. So that's how this film has been edited, right? It's not just one long film of them talking and eating dinner. It's them eating dinner, and then it cuts away, and it might show Bill Gates, and he's talking, and he's like, "Oh, well, blah blah blah, this and that," right? And then it cuts away. So here's the cutaway right before, Bill Gates says, "I don't recall talking about mask." So let's see. Do we have that up yet? Let's get that one here. We're going to share this tab instead. And there you go. All right. So this is a little bit further into the 15-minute video.
The key issue at the dinner was, what would the role of the foundation be? What could we do, and how should we be trying to help the world to wake up to the likelihood of a pandemic? And I think the key thing for us was to make it clear to both Bill and Melinda that this was likely to be something that would affect us all.
Keith and a few others said, this thing is not going to be contained. And then I said, but why isn't everybody just in emergency mode? And the answer was, they should be.
We didn't have a pandemic declared until March 11th. And so the governments didn't see it coming. They didn't talk about masks in the beginning. They tended to ignore the problem. Very few countries actually in that very first part actually locked down, right, and had a coherent response. Very few.
I don't remember talking about masks at all, but the two of you,
We
you personally were using masks.
Yeah.
I remember you seemed like a really extreme case, because you would wear the full thing when you'd leave your apartment. And it was like, is he gone overboard?
All right. So that is the portion of the 15-minute full video that was clipped. But you might have noticed something if you were really attentive. So let me go back to the very first video here. And we're gonna play just the first couple seconds. I want you to hear this because I thought this was interesting. So listen in very carefully. Listen to the first thing that he says.
I don't remember talking about masks.
Okay, so this video clips it at, I don't remember talking about mask. So then we go back and let's see here. We want to go to, give me just a second. Let me get that queued up here, right? All right, a little bit further. All right, so I think we got it here. So now we're going to We're going to bring that up. So this is the other video. So listen very carefully to what he says in this one.
I don't remember talking about math.
We didn't. I don't remember talking about mask. Now, the whole context of this video is that they're reflecting on a dinner that they had in the past, right? Now they are talking about like the responses and stuff like that. But if you listen carefully, they're really having a conversation about their prior conversation. And they're talking about a general time. They're talking about very early on. Okay. Now, look, I get it, folks. I'm a technologist. I've long seen Bill Gates as the bad guy from way back in the day when he first started out Microsoft. And anybody that's into technology, that really into technology, they'll probably remember, the early days where he was really opposed to open source and he wrote scathing letters, regarding open source. And, so, and you can, look, you can complain about Bill Gates. I mean, he's everybody's favorite punching bag, if you will. And it's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But if we want to have the most accurate information and be able to make the best decisions, we as the population, we need to be on guard for misinformation. And in this particular case, it got me, right? Like I sent it to a friend and I started arguing with him. And then he's like, dude, seriously, like there might be some more context, which is funny because this is something I have been on his side where I've been like, look, I think there might be some more context here. Like maybe we need to slow down and maybe we need to go back and look at the original video and see. And some of my past videos where I've criticized, like, say, the Libertarian Party, some of our internal fighting and the drama and stuff like that. Some of the things that I have personally complained about is that people will clip a video and make it sound like it's being that the person is saying something that they're not actually saying. And so, regardless of what you think of Mr. Gates, Bill Gates, it is in our interest to work hard and get the facts right. And in this particular case, he's not, at least, I mean, there is slight room for doubt. But in my opinion, when you watch the video in totality, he is not talking about, hey, I never ever talked about mask. He's talking in our prior conversations. We didn't, he said, we did not. And then he changes it up and he says, I don't recall talking about mask. Right. So he starts to say, like, we didn't, but then he kind of shifts it and says, well, I don't recall. And I think that's important. It's important because I don't want somebody clipping my words. And I don't, and I want people to know that when I speak, I'm speaking factually. Here's the thing. As somebody who puts their voice out there, who creates content, who is a talking head on some level, if I have a reputation for getting it wrong, I'm going to lose my audience, and rightfully so. But if I gain the reputation of always being correct, even if it means I'm being slower, then that will go toward building an audience. That will go toward people wanting to hear from me because they know when DL speaks, he speaks accurately. He speaks correct. He's rational, right? These are the kind of things. So it's more than just, it's really not like you could hate Bill Gates with all of your might. That's okay. Not a problem. But that doesn't change how people will think about you if you get things wrong. Now, lately, I've been seeing some bigger accounts that I'm familiar with and that I follow, and they'll sometimes delete things on social media. And I like the fact that I don't generally delete things on social media. Sometimes I'll go and delete something if it's got 0 likes and it doesn't seem to be doing well. I'm like, all right, well maybe that was kind of corny or dumb or something like that. So sometimes I might delete it in that particular case, but I try not to delete the stuff that I got wrong. And sometimes I'll just issue in a correction. And what I find frustrating is that sometimes people will delete things entirely. And so it's like they only leave up all the things that they got right. And I'm not a big fan of that. And I think people notice it. And I've seen from other accounts people have noticed it. They've been like, well, yeah, they just delete it anytime they get it wrong so they can act, like I've seen people say those kind of things. So to my audience, to you, it's our job as we're doing things, as we're going about sharing stuff, to make sure that we're sharing accurate information. And trust me, look, I'm a critic of how the government handled COVID. There is no shortage of legitimate criticism. I don't need false information about Bill Gates at a dinner in one of his podcasts I don't need that. I just need the right information, because I think there were plenty of failures and I think there were plenty of things that we could have done better. Okay? So it's that simple. Like, focus on the good stuff that is legitimate, and disregard the stuff that isn't correct, and spend time making sure before you share it that that you got it right. Because I'm going to point out, like, let's see, where is that here? You might not be able to see it. It might be too small on the screen, but there was at the time of this screenshot, this was liked by like 13,000 times, edging up toward 1,000 bookmarks, reshared 5,000 times, 700 some comments. Like, this got a lot of traction, and unfortunately, it was absolutely incorrect. It's totally misinformation. So it does nobody any good. And the thing is, when you contribute to misinformation, you help other people be susceptible to misinformation. And when you're susceptible to misinformation, you're susceptible to all of it, not just the good information, if you will, the good misinformation. So I encourage people to just take a double check. And if you can't find the original clip, maybe you don't share it, or ask, like, hey, where did this come from? And so there's me putting myself out on the table there, saying, hey, you know what? I got it wrong. I got it wrong. My buddy had it right. There was more context. So that's the end of that. Let's go ahead and move on. What's my next item that we're going to be talking about here? Oh yeah, here it is. So this is interesting. This is a video I saw. I got videos today, like a bunch of videos. So hope you're interested in a lot of videos. So this video is, one of those, I see them all the time. It's like these, I don't know where it came from. I just saw it, but it's one of those gender videos where somebody's talking about something. And what caught my attention was kind of the video. I kept seeing it, but then also a lot of people's responses to it. So let's go ahead and watch this. It's about a 1 minute and 22-second video. And so then we're going to talk about it. Now, I want to talk about this because this is Dad Musings. I want to talk about this like as if I was a dad. So let's play this, and then let's see what thoughts we can come up with this.
I got misgendered at work on Wednesday by someone that has been corrected before, and it just hit me hard. I was 3 hours into my long shift. I don't even remember how long it was, maybe 8 hours, my 8 hour shift. I immediately was like, no, I need to leave. So I left. I went home. And since then, I have been spiraling, which is not a fun thing to be dealing with when you are a broke person living in New York City and need to pay rent. So I'm getting ready to go to work right now, go to my other job. I called out last night, and I'm having to talk myself into showing up today. And to all of my trans friends, to all of my trans followers, to any trans person that stumbles upon this video, I love you so much. I love you so, so much. I know how much this hurts. I think for a second I got too comfortable and I forgot how much this hurts me. And I lost my usual coping skills. And so that's what I'm trying to work on now. I thankfully have people in my corner that are helping, but it's hard to get help when your instinct is to cut everyone off and refuse help. So to my trans friends, to all of the trans people watching this, I love you. I love you so much. To all of the cis people watching this, watch yourself. Check yourself.
All right. So she tells us to check ourselves. That's very interesting. Here's what I thought about this. A lot of people were talking and they were like, she's narcissistic. And maybe so. Like, I get it. I get where they're coming from. Like, she's in there, she keeps messing with her hair, and it appears that, like, it's, kind of like this, well, I'm just this kind of, and so kind of this attitude of narcissism. So I totally get where people are coming from, but I'm not really sure that just saying, oh, you're narcissistic is useful. like, okay, what if she were to happen to come across those comments? There's nothing in those comments that would be something that might give her a moment of pause to go, oh, right? Like you're just calling her a name. And it's not that I'm disagreeing. Like there does seem to be some narcissism, but it's our response that I think is important. What should our response be? So, my first thought was like, well, what if that was my kid? Now she appears to be in like her early 20s, my guess. Um, so I would hope that by the time my child was 20, that I had raised them differently. But let's assume for whatever reason, this is where my child is, and they're having a conversation with me and they're telling me some of these same things. So I think the first thing that I would point out is that 8 hours is not a long shift. Now, it might be in the type of work that she's doing. Maybe the type of work she's doing is typically only a 4 hour shift or a 5 hour shift, and she's doing 8 hours. But I think the first point, I was like, look, you need to be prepared because 8 hours is a very standard time to work. In fact, depending on your job, you could end up working more than 8 hours. And so if you're 3 hours in, and you're like, "Oh no, I got a long shift coming of 8 hours," that could be rough for you. So I would encourage my kid, if this were my kid, I would encourage them to take a different perspective and be like, "Look, 8 hours, that's common. It does feel like a long time, and sometimes the work that you do makes it feel even longer." Like, there's been like, when I worked at, like, not McDonald's, but Burger King when I was much younger, one of the things that I absolutely loved were rush hours. They could be stressful, but the rush hour would make a couple of hours go by like it felt like in minutes. Because at the time I was a young person and 8 hours did feel like a long time out of my day. And because I had things that I wanted to do otherwise, I would rather go and do something else, but I needed money, of course, so I had to go and work. And, so, I get it, but I think that the first thing that we need to have a conversation about is like, look, 8 hours is a very standard shift. That's not out of the ordinary. So you're gonna have to get used to it because it doesn't really get any better. And depending on the work that you do, you may end up find yourself working 10 or even 12 hours. I think my worst and this was like a huge project for a company that I worked for, we worked 96 hours in 6 days. It's not a joke. It was a huge account that we had just got. We were trying to switch over to being their new supplier, and I was basically doing like industrial engineering type work. My job was to manage the the cyclical system of parts coming in. So we were a distribution company and we were supplying parts to a production line. And so my job was to make sure that they never ran out of parts. And we were talking like nuts, bolts, and screws. So each area on the line could have like 2 parts, 10 parts, 15 parts, whatever. It had just any number of different parts. And then you had multiple areas on the line or multiple positions on the line. So I was managing all of those, and nobody could run out of parts because if somebody ran out of parts, then it could cost our company a lot of money. So I think that, encouraging and communicating, that sometimes you get involved in a line of work and it could be a lot more than 8 hours, but at least 8 hours is your standard. I think that's the first thing we need to communicate to our young people and kind of prepare them. We need to let them know that it's normal. Because look, I'm 45. She's clearly not 45. I'm 45. So it's my job as the older generation to help prepare. It does no good to just sit back on your keyboard and say, "Ah, you're so privileged and narcissistic." That that may be true, but that doesn't get her to a new place. The other thing I noticed is she said she immediately left. And I was like, "You immediately left your job because you got misgendered?" Like, that's not how life works. People are depending on you to be there. Imagine if I was her coworker. Now, I don't know what kind of, again, I don't know what kind of work she does, but imagine that I'm the coworker and she leaves. And I'm assuming, again, here, since we're talking about gender, I'm assuming I might be upset because now I might have to do her work. right? Because she felt that this was such a problem that she had to leave. Okay. Um, then she said, I called out the night prior. So she apparently left. And then I'm not really clear if it was her second job, but apparently she called off. So she got misgendered. Then she called off, or then she left early. I gotta go. I said, I gotta go. This is too much. And then she called in because she was having problems coping. I'm going to get to that in just a second. So, and then she's like, I'm getting ready to go to work. I had to talk myself into showing up. So this seems to have impacted her quite a bit. Okay. And look, when I grew up, the idea, we understood your feelings are your feelings. Like nobody can control how you feel, but we can advise you on how you respond. So let me tell you a story because a lot of times when people talk about these kind of stories and they just kind of say, oh, she's privileged and narcissistic, we come across as the bad guy, right? Because, like, oh, you're being so dismissive. You just don't understand. Well, actually, I do. So let me tell you a story. In that same story I just told a moment ago, where we were on a job for 96 hours, working 96 hours in 6 days. So what happened was we had acquired a new customer that was in a different state. And so I traveled and I was staying on the border of Maryland and Pennsylvania. And the job was in Pennsylvania, but we were staying at a hotel that happened to be available on the Maryland side. So I'm staying in this hotel. The hotel is like about 30 minutes maybe from the work site. Okay. So when we worked 96 hours in 6 days, that included the time that we were driving. So I literally would just go to the hotel, crash, wake up, and then immediately go back. And so for like 6 days, we ended up working like 96 hours. So we were stressed. We were stressed out to the max. And there came a point where I got an opportunity to, let me see, I'm trying to remember there were multiple stories. I'm trying to remember all the details of this one particular story. Okay. So I happened to be, yeah, I remember now. I was working the second shift. So the production line, they basically ran a first, second, and third shift. Their third shift was very, very light, not much going on. Most everything happened in their first shift, and then they had a lighter second shift. So I'm working and they had 4 different facilities within the area. So I'm working at one of the facilities for during second shift. So I leave to go to dinner or lunch or whatever you want to call it. So I leave and I'm having my dinner and I didn't go anywhere fancy. I was literally like going to like some fast food place, get some food, gobble it down and then head back. So I'm not out very long. I'm out like about as short of a time as you could possibly be. So I get a phone call that the production line went down. And I was like, oh Lord, because we have contracts with at the company that I work at, we had contracts that said if the line stopped because we didn't deliver parts, then we were responsible for the downtime. So that meant all the cost of, however they calculated it with the production, and then the cost of their employees standing there doing nothing. So it was like, it was funny because I remember someone had one time suggested chartering a plane when there was a different customer that was short on parts. And they're like, we might have to charter a plane. I was like, you're going to charter a plane over nuts and bolts? True enough, because chartering the plane would actually be cheaper. So I rushed back. I'm like, oh Lord, this is bad. This is not good. I cannot have this happen. And I had thought everything, I went around and made my checks and everything looked good. So I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So I get back, I find the manager, the floor manager, and I get with him and I'm like, hey, what's going on? I got hurt. I got wind that there was that the line stopped. And he's like, nope, it didn't happen. I was like, excuse me? And he's like, okay, so here's what happens. He goes, the guys on the line, when they see the parts getting low because they don't want the line to stop, they will alert. And sometimes they think that, by saying the line is stopped, that will expedite, that will make people move faster. So these guys basically lied. They lied, but if you will, like a noble lie, they lied because they didn't want the line to go down. So they were just like, they were trying to put a little bit of extra pressure on in the very beginning. Okay. So, okay, we work it out fine. No big deal. I'm not too mad. They're not mad because their line actually didn't go down and it had parts to continue out the night. So they were good to go. No issues. So I get back to my hotel now at about 11 o'clock. My boss calls me and I pick up I see him. I see, so I go on those old flip phones. And so I see it's my boss. I'm like, oh, okay. So I pick up the phone and he just commences to yelling at me, yelling and screaming and swearing about the line going down. And I'm like, sir, I didn't realize I'm not going to use his name, but I'm like, sir, I, and I'm like trying to get a word in and he's not letting me. And I'm trying to say like, dude, this did not happen. You got fed misinformation or you don't have the full information. Like maybe the same story got to him, but he didn't get the part of the story where it turns out there was no issue. So, so he's yelling at me, cussing at me, and I had been on the road for like several weeks at this time, away from my wife. And one of the last things that he said, he was like, I'll keep you here forever. Now, he didn't mean forever. And he's like, you'll never effing go home. Right. And he said that because he's being like mean, like just being a jerk. And so then he hung up. So now I'm pissed. I'm upset. I'm angry because I'm like, dude, you just called me and yelled at me, cussed at me, and hung up, and never once gave me an opportunity to tell you that you didn't have all of the facts. There was more to the story. And I tried. So now I'm pissed. I am so angry. Well, I did not go to work because I have to pay my bills. But I did stay up all night. I was up all night. I'm a brooder. So I was brooding. And I don't know how many times I cussed at him under my breath. I walked outside the hotel and I'm walking around and I'm like, that son of a, and I'm just cussing and carrying on under my breath and I'm angry and I couldn't sleep. I was up the entire night. I did not go to sleep, not once. In the morning, I get cleaned up and I go downstairs and I have my breakfast and then I'm at the, in the lobby where they have the extra computers and whatnot. So I'm at the computer and I'm going to put everything on the table. I'm going to tell you where I was. This is how angry I was. So my boss at the time was a gay man. Okay. Now I haven't had an issue with gay people since I was like, I don't know, 20. And even then it was just stupid juvenile stuff. Okay. But he was a gay man. So he comes down and I wanted to say some of the meanest homophobic things to him because hurt people, right? Like he was vicious to me. I wanted to be vicious back. And I knew that being vicious in that way would just sting, right? But I also knew that would get me fired. So he came down and he was like, do we need to have a conversation? And I literally told him, I said, I'm not prepared to lose my job today. So no. That's exactly what I said. No lie. Because I knew better. I knew that, if I started into it and I laid into him, it wasn't going to be pretty. And who knows, it might even turned into an altercation. Probably not, but you never know. So anyway, so now what did I do after that? Now I'm angry. Well, I went to work, did my job. Okay. Because the show must go on. But it doesn't mean that I just let it go. I called and I consulted with somebody who is in a different department, but higher up, a friend of mine in different. And I said, hey, this thing happened, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, look, you need to go to his boss and have a conversation. You need to let them know it's not acceptable. I said, okay. So I called up his boss and I said, look, this is what happened. And I said, this happened, this happened, this happened. Then I got back to the hotel and then he called me, cussed me out, blah, blah, blah. Now at the time, the company had given me a laptop. They'd given me a company car, which they paid for like all the gas. And I had, the company cell phone, which wasn't really all that impressive, but I had all these three things. And a Ford Explorer that they provided me and that I was allowed to use as my regular vehicle. It was not marked with their company name, so I could just drive to the store. I could go on vacations with it. They allowed me, and I just turned in gas receipts. right? So they paid for the gas. So for a younger guy, it was a relatively good deal. So I called up his boss and I said, this is what happened. This is how he spoke to me. That's not acceptable. You need to do something about this. And then I said, this is what I told him. I said, I will not be talked to like this. I will go back to working in the warehouse and you can have the car, the laptop, and the phone. I don't care about it, but nobody will talk to me like that ever. And he said, I'll take care of it. So then, like, I think it was like the next day or maybe later that day. I don't remember exactly. My boss came to me and he sat me down and he said, look, I need to apologize. I was out of line. And mostly the apology was fine. He did say, well, I thought you were trying to sabotage the job. I think he was just kind of playing cover. Like, like, well, I thought you were doing this. I'm not going to speculate on what was going on, but I don't believe that was true because we had literally worked 60, what did I say it was, 96 hours in 6 days. Like we were working like our tails off. So there was no reason, like, why would I sabotage all my hard work and deal with all that stress that I put upon myself to do this job, to do it well. And there are many, many stories, and hopefully in future podcasts, I'll tell you some of the stories. But there was a lot that happened. There was no way in the world that I was going to sabotage after all that work. That was just crazy talk. But I let it go because I got the apology, and that was that. So to me, us as an older, the older generation, we need to do more than just tell young women like this, hey, you're being narcissistic. We need to sit them down and say, look, I get it. I've been there. I've experienced something just like you. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that she got misgendered. And I think that's ridiculous. Like, I think it's ridiculous. I think it's so silly. But that's where she is. And she has to learn to deal with that in the same way that I had to learn to deal with a nasty boss or a boss who got very nasty with me. Because imagine if she had experienced my story. Like, she might not go back to work at all. We have to prepare our young people to deal with people that are, maybe they're just careless and they don't care about our gender and our pronouns, which a lot of people are there. Or maybe they're vicious and they're going to say the most vile things to you and make the most vile accusations that are completely untrue and then not even give you a chance to defend yourself. We have to prepare our young people better. So that's my commentary on this young lady. And again, I know that maybe, since she's talking about being misgendered, I assume that she probably goes by something else. I don't know what that something else is, and I'm not too worried about it because at the end of the day, the idea is to build up our young people so they're more resilient, so they can handle. There's almost 8 billion people on the planet. Somebody's going to be mean to you at some point. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to this last one. This last one's a little bit more sad, but it is what it is. So let's pull this up on the screen. This actually comes out of Jacksonville here. So this is a recent story from here in Jacksonville. This clip is about 3 minutes long. So bear with me. I know it's a little bit of a long clip, but I felt like it's worth listening to the whole thing.
In other local news tonight, neighbors are speaking out after a 14-year-old boy was shot while allegedly burglarizing a car.
I felt like I was being protected because right now it's as though we have no protection for what we work hard for every day.
The story has been generating hundreds of comments from viewers on news4jax.com.
That's right. The burglary and the shooting happened just over a week ago on Walnut Street in Jacksonville's Springfield neighborhood. The boy survived, and the man who shot him was charged with attempted murder. News4Jax reporter Eric Avigné has new information about this investigation.
Neighbors frustrated with dealing with auto thefts and burglaries in this area of Springfield say it was not a matter of if, but a matter of when someone would catch the thieves in the act. Days after we reported the arrest of 49-year-old Antonio Cobb, the man who police say shot a 14-year-old boy in the back after confronting him and 2 others burglarizing his car, Cobb's neighbor, Teresa Glenn, says she believes the same trio broke into her 2013 Hyundai Sonata and stole it back on August 14th. Her car was found 6 days later.
When I got my car back, as you can see, this is what it looked like.
Windows smashed, electrical wiring was pulled from the dashboard and near the ignition and steering wheel. The front bumper cracked after the car had been in a collision. Also, she says the interior smelled of mildew since there was no cover on the windows to keep rainwater out. A nearby surveillance camera recorded 10 seconds of the burglary. Then, in the early morning of October 5th, 3 people she believed to be the same 3 in the video attempted to re-steal the car.
They had a little SV something cord or chip that they could put in this car and recrank this car.
They were not able to restart the car, so they moved on. According to police, the owner of this car, 49-year-old Antonio Cobb, walked out his front door and caught the trio inside his vehicle. Police say they jumped out and took off running. That's when police say Cobb fired his gun at them and struck one of them in the back. The person who was shot was identified as a 14-year-old boy. News4Jax has learned a neighbor showed police surveillance video of Cobb shooting at the trio and striking the boy. Cobb was arrested and charged with attempted murder. Glenn says she later learned that as many as 15 vehicles in this neighborhood were broken into that morning.
I felt like my neighbor was protecting us, not just his stuff, but protecting our whole neighborhood.
The law does not allow citizens to shoot burglars who are running away and not posing imminent danger to people. Also, Cobb was prohibited from possessing a firearm because he was previously convicted of manslaughter. As for the 14-year-old boy who was shot, he was charged with burglary. According to this juvenile justice court document, a judge has ordered restitution for Glenn. Glenn says she hopes that restitution comes from the boy's parents because before her vehicle was stolen and badly damaged, it was paid off. But she was recently forced to purchase a used SUV because her insurance determined that her 2013 Hyundai Sonata was not salvageable. Reporting in Springfield, Eric Avier, Channel 4, the local station.
In other local news tonight, neighbors are...
Sorry about that. All right. So, a lot of people would just kind of brush this off as well. FAFO, F around, find out, right? And to some extent, that's true. You go and you break into people's cars, you never know what's going to happen. And I think this is a very sad situation for a number of reasons. Number one, I don't like anybody getting shot. Like I accept it sometimes because, hey, you do things, you have to suffer the results of those things. On the other hand, it's sad that this man shot him while he was running away after only an attempted theft of the car. That is not an appropriate reason to shoot somebody. When somebody's fleeing, then let them go. Now, as far as his prior conviction that prevented him from having a firearm, I completely disagree with that. You should always be permitted to defend yourself with whatever you feel is appropriate. So whether you use a stick, your fist, or a gun, it doesn't matter to me. You always have the right of self-defense. And in fact, to my knowledge, there are no laws in the United States that say under a conviction, you are not allowed to defend yourself. Now, there are laws that will prevent felons from having firearms and maybe some other weapons, but they do not prevent them from actually defending themselves. Now, when it comes to property, this is a very interesting thing because a lot of people will say, well, somebody's life isn't worth your car. Honestly, I think you could say in the reverse. You could say, do you not believe that, how do the people say it? I'm drawing a blank on how they say it. They say you value your property more than you value somebody else's life. And then the response is, no, that thief values my property more than they value their own life, which is to an extent true. And in this particular case, it seems like there was like 15 cars that had been damaged by probably the same 3. And so at some point, the neighbors get tired of this. And I found it very interesting. The woman was like, look, I feel like he was trying to protect us. Like she knows that it was a 14-year-old boy. She knows that the boy was running away. Yet she still looked at it and said, he's trying to protect us because we're tired of being victimized. And it doesn't matter by who. We're tired of being victimized. Like this poor woman, she had a paid off car. We are right now in the middle of conversations nationally about inflation and wages and all these things that are related to people's economic situation. So yeah, I do feel for the woman. She had a paid off car, but now she either bought a new car, so she had to spend a lot of money, or she has to have a car payment. I'm not sure which one that which one is the actual specific here, but one way or another, she is now out money. So it's not even like the argument when people say, "Oh, you value your property more than somebody else's life." The reality is, to some extent, yeah, we will, because we work hard for that. Because if let's say I buy a car and I pay it off. Now that car, by the time I pay it off, is probably fairly old if I made the regular payments, maybe a 5-year payment or something like that, right? And but now my two, three, four, $500 car payment is now something I don't have to worry about. So that's money basically that I can use elsewhere to pay different bills, to fix my house, whatever the case may be, to keep me off of welfare. I mean, there's that money can go to a lot of good uses. But then if I have to turn around through somebody else's poor behavior, and then I have to now buy a new car, use that money in a way that I didn't intend or that I shouldn't have had to. Yeah, that is a huge problem. And so I'm only going to have a little bit of sympathy here. And the sympathy only is because he was running away. Because again, at the end of the day, if somebody is running away, they are no longer a threat. You have no right to shoot them. Now you are infringing on their right. And it doesn't matter that they were trying to steal your car, and it looked like a fairly nice car. But we've got to start letting our young people know you might get shot. And I think it's good for the neighbors, in a sense, to come out and say, well, I think that they were protecting us. Because what message does that send to young people? Hey, you might get shot, and we may not be so concerned about it. We might be like, well, you shouldn't have done it, because people are tired of it. So now I want to end on one more note. If you're watching and you're a man, I am a big fan of mentoring. And I think mentoring is something that could help out both this story where the young boys, the young teenage boys, probably boys, were trying to steal cars, and it could help out the young girl who was, basically had a breakdown over being misgendered. There's a local organization called Daniel Kids here in Jacksonville, and I used to work with them as a mentor. So what they did was they assigned me a young guy who was, they always, men with boys, women with girls. So they assigned me to a caseworker who happened to be, how do I say it? They assigned me to a young man who happened to have a caseworker. So he was just simply an at-risk youth. And so I mentored him from roughly around 15 and a half, all the way until he was 18, and he basically aged out. We still keep in contact. He is now doing well. He's got a wife and a child, and he's got a decent job. Like, he is a productive member of society. Now, he might have turned out that way without my help, but the fact that I was there at least contributed in some way. And so he ended up not becoming one of these tragedies. So I want to encourage you, especially if you're a man. And the reason I'm saying that is for two reasons. Number one, I'm Liberty Dad, so I'm generally going to be talking to men. And then number two, when I was in that program, they told us that they have the biggest trouble, that their biggest challenge is getting enough men. They're like, we've got plenty of women. We don't have enough men to match with boys. And I get it. Somebody else's parents should do better, right? Men shouldn't be in prison while their kids are out running the streets. But the fact is, they're there. So, the way that we can help prevent these kind of things, the way that we can help stop young men from going out and trying to steal cars and then end up potentially getting shot, the way that we can make our children more resilient, right, to people that are bullying them or just saying something they don't like in the workplace, is to mentor them and be there and express to them, hey, 45, I've been there. I probably got 10 stories to every one of yours. Okay. I've had a lot of experiences. We need to be there. We need to mentor them. We need to bring them around to maturity. And that's what's going to make a better world, not just sitting back on the keyboard and sending messages all day, criticizing them for this and that. We've got to do better, folks. All right. I hope you enjoyed the show this morning. As usual, catch me every morning, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern time, for an informed discussion on politics and culture. And then Sundays at 7 p.m. with my co-host, Susan Hogarth, where we're going to look across the vastness of tyranny in this country. And we're going to find out what the Libertarian Party is doing at the state and local level. Last week, or this last Sunday, we we talked about a guy out in Arizona who went to defend an old man that he didn't even know. Go check out that episode. It's from this last Sunday. I don't remember the number. But he went to city council, and then the local party made a big stink about this old man potentially being kicked out of his trailer that was on a property that his granddaughter owns. The city said, hey, you can't have these two things on the same property. So he went to bat for this man. He doesn't even know him, right? So good things are happening in the Libertarian Party. We've got a lot of great activists doing great things. I'm trying to highlight them Sundays at 7 p.m. Be sure to do all the proper audience actions. I want you to like the videos. Go ahead and drop a comment in. Sometimes I try to read the comments on air, but it's kind of difficult because I'm a one-man band here, so I'm trying to keep up with my notes and what I prepared for the show, and then also the comments. But I do read all of the comments, and sometimes I try to respond to them as well. So, but make sure you're doing all those things. Go to youtube.libertydad.com. Check me out, rumble.libertydad.com. Promise you more things are coming. If I can get 5 people to follow my channel on Rumble, they will allow me to start streaming there. I have to have 5 followers on Rumble, or I have to pay them money. So in order to not pay, because right now, eventually I will monetize this show, but not yet. So if you can help me out, go to Rumble, give me a follow. 5 follows, I can start streaming there. All right. So we're looking to do bigger and better things on this show. At any rate, final word. If you want to follow me on social media, Liberty Dad on Facebook, more likely to catch me, Liberty Dad Pod on X, formerly known as Twitter. You can also email me, libertydadpodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. Remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you tomorrow. But for now, I'm out.